Our story today is about a boy who thought he knew the answers to these questions, until life forced him to start everything from scratch and find his true worth in a place he never expected. In the cobblestone alleys of Florence, where art and history are intertwined, lived a young man named Alessandro. For Alessandro, life was an endless series of fleeting pleasures. He was the only son of Marco, one of the biggest textile merchants in Tuscany, and had never known the taste of need. His world was confined to their magnificent villa on the outskirts of the city, amidst glamorous nightly parties, the roar of his latest model Ferrari, and the gleam of Swiss watches on his wrist. His wardrobe was a museum of famous brands: Gucci, Prada, Versace, each worn only once and then forgotten. To fill the deep void within, Alessandro shopped incessantly. Each purchase was a short-term injection of meaning into his monotonous life. He thought happiness could be bought with a credit card, but every morning when he woke up, the same feeling of emptiness from the day before awaited him. Until one day, the blue sky of his life turned dark forever. The news struck like a devastating thunderbolt. His father, Marco, had gone bankrupt. A wrong investment, a misplaced trust, and the entire empire he had worked for years to build collapsed. Marco, the proud man who had always seemed steadfast and invincible, could not bear this blow. The psychological pressure was so intense that his heart gave out. A severe stroke turned him into a shadow of his former self. Half of his body was paralyzed, and words were trapped in his mouth. The magnificent villa, the expensive cars, the full bank accounts, all disappeared. Alessandro and his sick father moved into a small, damp apartment in one of the city's old neighborhoods. There were no more wealthy friends and nightly parties. Alessandro's phone, which once never rested for a moment, was now submerged in a deathly silence. For the first time in his life, Alessandro faced reality. Looking at his father, that steadfast mountain who now lay in bed like a helpless child, pained his heart. His father's silent tears pierced his soul like a dagger. He realized he had to do something. He had to be the man of the house. Every morning at sunrise, Alessandro would leave the house in simple clothes and with an anxious face to find a job. But the world of work was foreign to him. He who had spent his entire life spending money now didn't know how to earn it. He had no skills or experience. His self-confidence had dropped to zero. Wherever he went for work, as a waiter in a restaurant, a porter in the market, or an apprentice in a shop, he was fired after a few days due to his ineptitude and clumsiness. The contemptuous looks of employers and the phrase, "You're not cut out for this job," hit him like a sledgehammer. One autumn evening, a cold wind swirled through the alleys. Alessandro, tired, hopeless, and hungry, sat on the stone steps of a church. He felt he had reached the end of the line. Beside him, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, a white beard, and a kind face sat on a small wooden stool, carefully and patiently sewing the sole of an old shoe. He was Giuseppe, the neighborhood's itinerant cobbler. The heavy silence between them was broken by Alessandro's trembling voice. Having nothing left to lose, he opened his heart to the man. He spoke of his past life, of his father, of the bankruptcy, of his failed attempts to find a job, and of the deep feeling of worthlessness that had consumed him. His tears flowed uncontrollably, dripping onto the cold cobblestones of the street. Giuseppe listened to his words carefully. A deep sadness settled in his eyes. The story of this young aristocrat who had fallen on such hard times pained his heart. He himself was a poor man, his possessions limited to his toolbox and a few pieces of leather, but he could not remain indifferent. His mind got to work. How could he help this young man? Suddenly, a spark lit up in his eyes. His gaze fell on the beautiful shoes on Alessandro's feet, the only remaining memento from his wealthy days. An idea came to him. "My son," Giuseppe said in a warm voice, "I don't have much money to give you, but I have a skill. I can make shoes. If you want, I will make a few pairs of handmade shoes, and you can place them here next to me and sell them. The profit is yours." Alessandro looked at the middle-aged man in disbelief. Someone who barely made a living for himself was willing to help him. This was the first glimmer of hope in the darkest period of his life. Since he had no other choice and had been turned away from everywhere, he accepted the offer with a voice trembling with emotion. The next day, Giuseppe came to their meeting spot with 3 pairs of beautiful leather shoes he had stayed up all night to make. Alessandro arranged the shoes next to Giuseppe's small stall. At first, he was ashamed. He couldn't lift his head and talk to the customers. His voice trembled, and he felt that everyone recognized him and was laughing at his situation. But Giuseppe taught him with patience and kindness. He told him how to smile, how to explain the quality of the leather to a customer, and how to treat people with respect. Gradually, Alessandro's ice began to melt. He learned that selling wasn't just about selling a product, but about building a connection. With every pair of shoes he sold, he not only earned money, but also gained a bit of self-confidence. He was discovering abilities he never knew he had: perseverance, patience, the art of persuasion. These were things that couldn't be bought with any amount of money. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Alessandro became more skilled every day. Their sales increased more and more. He now not only provided for himself and his father's medication, but had also managed to save some money. One night he excitedly told Giuseppe, "Master, it's time for us to leave the street. We must rent a shop. We can do it." Giuseppe, who now regarded Alessandro as his own son, agreed with a smile of satisfaction. With the money they had saved, the two rented a small shop in one of the city's busy passages. Giuseppe sewed day and night, and Alessandro sold with indescribable energy and enthusiasm. Alessandro's innate talent for understanding fashion and people's tastes revolutionized their business. Gradually, their small shop flourished. They no longer just sold shoes, they added belts, bags, and then men's clothing to their collection. The small shop turned into a large, stylish store. The name Alessandro and Giuseppe became known as a symbol of quality and beauty. They now had 20 sales employees, and their store was one of the most popular clothing stores in the city. Alessandro became a wealthy man again. But this time, his wealth was different from his past fortune. This wealth was the result of his own hard work. Every euro of that money carried a story of effort, patience, and self-respect. He was no longer empty inside. He was filled with a sense of pride, capability, and worth. On this difficult path, he not only learned how to work, but also found himself. One evening, when he returned home, he saw his father sitting in a wheelchair by the window, watching the sunset. For the first time in a long while, there was a real smile on his father's lips. Marco took his son's hand with difficulty and said, his voice still slightly stuttering, "I am proud of you, my son. The day I lost everything, I thought it was the end. But I was wrong. That day, you were born. Now you are a truly wealthy and powerful man, more powerful than I ever was." Tears welled up in Alessandro's eyes. These words were the most valuable treasure he had ever acquired in his entire life. Alessandro's story reminds us that the greatest treasures in life are not in our bank accounts, but are hidden in our hearts and our will. Failure is not the end of the road. It is a new intersection that gives us the opportunity to find the right path and get to know our true selves. Our worth is not in what we have, but in the power we show to build our lives. Now you tell us, have you ever experienced a failure in your life that ultimately led to your growth? Share your story with us and others in the comments so we can learn from each other's experiences. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel to hear more inspiring stories together. Take care of the treasures within you. Until the next video, goodbye.